The field watch. Before 1914, the wristwatch was considered a women's accessory. Men wore pocket watches. Officers who wore one on the wrist did so with a degree of embarrassment. Then the First World War began, and everything changed in 4 years. An officer in a trench cannot synchronize an attack on a pocket watch with one hand, while the other holds a weapon. The wristwatch solved that problem, literally. By 1918, it had displaced the pocket watch entirely, not as a fashion statement, but as a survival necessity. The field watch is the most honest type of all. A matte dial with no glare. Arabic numerals, maximum legibility, luminous hands, a case that doesn't care what happens to it. The NATO strap, that same single nylon band, now considered a fashion accessory, was standardized by the British military in 1973 for one reason. If one of the keepers breaks in combat, the watch stays on the wrist. The Seiko SNK809, priced from $60 to $80, reproduces the same concept that kept officers alive in the trenches. The IWC pilot's watch, at $4,500, is the same concept, hand-assembled with components tolerant to the micron. The difference in accuracy is negligible. The difference in durability is real, but not 60 times over. A diver without a watch does not know how much AAR is left, and only finds out when it is too late. That is why the 1953 Rolex Submariner had a screw-down crown that keeps water out. That is why the bezel rotates only counterclockwise, so that if you knock it underwater, the displayed time remaining gets shorter, never longer. The error always falls on the safe side. There is a detail most people do not know. ISO 6425 certification is not marketing. It is a protocol. To be called a diver, a watch must withstand 125% of its rated depth. The luminescent dial must glow for a minimum of 100 minutes in darkness. Measured and documented. A watch without that certification may be water resistant, but it is not a diver. The Casio MDV 106 at $50 to $60 meets that standard. Reliable, functional, and nobody cries if it gets wrecked. The Rolex Submariner gives you proprietary oyster steel, sapphire crystal, and a ceramic bezel that will not fade from UV exposure over decades. The vast majority of Submariner owners have never dived deeper than a swimming pool. Rolex knows this. The dive watch stopped being about depth long ago. It became about who you are on the surface. 3. The chronograph, a stopwatch built into a watch. 2 pushers, one starts and stops, the other resets. First patent in 1816 by Louis Moinet. The original purpose was tracking astronomical objects. By the mid-20th century, it was on the wrist of every racing driver. If you actually need a stopwatch, a Seiko SSB031 or Casio Edifice for $100 to $250 will win every time. A quartz chronograph is more accurate than a mechanical one by definition. That's just physics. But in a mechanical chronograph, there is a detail you feel with your finger and can only see under a microscope. The column wheel. Cheaper chronographs use a cam lever. It works fine, but with play and some resistance. The column wheel is a more complex and significantly more expensive construction. Press the pusher and the click is crisp, instant, effortless. You feel the difference in your hand. You cannot see it without magnification. You are paying for a sensation almost nobody will ever appreciate. NASA tests the candidates properly, 93 degrees Celsius, then minus 18 degrees Celsius, over 15 cycles, in a vacuum, at 95% humidity, and a 130 decibel sonic shock. Rolex and Longines failed. The Speedmaster passed everything, with a damaged dial, but the movement never stopped. Buzz Aldrin steps onto the moon with an Omega on his wrist. Neil Armstrong leaves his in the module, in case the onboard timer fails. Aldrin's Speedmaster is later stolen in transit to the Smithsonian. It has never been found. 4. The GMT watch. Pan American Airways launches the first transatlantic routes. Pilots need to see home time and destination time simultaneously. Pan Am comes to Rolex with a specific technical brief, a fourth hand, one rotation every 24 hours, and a two-tone bezel, blue for night and red for day. The blue and red combination earns the nickname Pepsi. There is a detail about the original GMT that very few people know. Its bezel was made from bakelite with luminescent radium. It cracked and turned out to be radioactive. The US Atomic Energy Commission took an interest in Rolex. The watch was redesigned. Those rare originals now sell at auction for many times the price of new ones. A Casio or Seiko GMT that sells for $150 to $400 shows 5 time zones simultaneously with automatic radio signal synchronization, and it is more accurate than any mechanical Rolex. The Rolex GMT Master 2 officially starts at $10,000. You physically cannot just walk in and buy one. Rolex deliberately produces less than demand requires. The shortage is not a logistics problem, it is a strategy. The GMT Master 2 is no longer a pilot instrument, it has become a language. If you know what Pepsi, Batgirl, or root beer mean, you are inside the club. If not, you are outside it. The simplest on the outside, the most difficult to manufacture. A slim case, under 7mm, demands components tolerance to measurements invisible to the naked eye. The thinner the watch, the more expensive it is to build. This is not a paradox, it's physics. In a smaller space, there is less room for error. Piaget, Bulgari, and Patek Philippe have spent decades competing over who can produce the thinnest movement. The Piaget Altiplano ultimate concept is 2mm thick. Servicing costs a fortune. Practical advantage over a normal watch, 0. Longines, founded in 1832, was once considered one of the most prestigious first-tier brands. Then Swatch Group repositioned it into the accessible segment. The watch didn't change, the marketing strategy did. At $600 you buy the same Swiss heritage, just without the right logo. The Patek Philippe Calatrava, a template from 1932 that the industry still follows. From $20,000, a private company, 60,000 watches a year, fewer than Rolex makes in a week. The most expensive watch in auction history, the Patek Grandmaster Chime, sold for $31.19 million in 2019. It's sold in stainless steel, the cheapest case material, for the highest price in history. Most of the cost of a dress watch is in its finishing. Anglage, hand polishing the edges of components at a 45-degree angle. Perlage, a pattern of microscopic circles on the interior plates that nobody will see without a microscope. A dress watch hides its complexity. The next type makes a spectacle of it. To skeletonize a watch is to take the movement and cut away everything that is not structurally necessary. Every excess gram of metal is gone, until only what the watch cannot run without remains. The result is that the movement becomes entirely visible. Gears, springs, the balance wheel, all on display. The watch no longer conceals how it works. It flaunts it. This adds nothing to function, and in fact it complicates servicing because every component is exposed to dust and moisture. Craftsmen spend hundreds of hours finishing what remains. Anglage along every exposed edge, every surface hand polished so that as the wrist turns, the movement catches the light. Jaeger-LeCoultre produces some of the most celebrated skeletonized movements in the world. Their reverso skeleton, with the movement visible from both sides of the reversible case, is the benchmark of the form. At the other end of the price spectrum sits the Tissot T Complications Squelette at $3,000. The same principle, the same idea. The difference is in how many hours a craftsman spent on each edge. A dress watch says, "Do not look inside." A skeleton says, "Look nowhere else." Both are expensive, for opposite reasons. In 1801, Abraham Louis Breguet solved a problem the wristwatch no longer had, gravity distorting the accuracy of pocket watches. The solution was a balance wheel in a rotating cage, averaging out the error. It was brilliant, but for a wristwatch entirely unnecessary, because the wrist's own movement provides the compensation. The tourbillon cage weighs less than 1/4 of a gram, consists of dozens of components, and makes over 500,000 rotations a year. Hundreds of hours of a craftsman's craftsman's work so that nobody will see any of it beneath a shirt cuff. Jaeger-LeCoultre took the idea to its limit. Caliber 170, 1946, was the first production tourbillon. They made 26 examples, and it won awards for the precision of a mechanism that was already redundant. The gyro tourbillon, 2004, rotates on 2 axes simultaneously with 113 components and 0.33 grams. Technically flawless, and practically just as unnecessary. The skeleton shows the movement, the tourbillon turns it into sculpture. This is not a tool, it is art that measures time for the sake of time itself. Timex releases the Iron Man, the first watch designed specifically for triathlon. Chronograph, countdown timer, alarm, backlight. Ugly, plastic, absolutely functional, it made no claim to be anything other than an instrument for an athlete, and it became the best-selling sports watch in American history. Garmin saw a different question in all of this. What if a watch knew where you were? In 1989, the company began with GPS navigators for aviation and the military. In 2003, the first GPS sports watch appeared on the wrist. Suddenly, a watch knew not just the time, but the route, the pace, the elevation, the distance. Today, Garmin is used by soldiers, mountaineers, pilots, and astronauts, and simultaneously by marathon runners at every race start in the world. Apple releases the Apple Watch, and for the first time since 1914, the wristwatch becomes a genuine instrument for everyone again. ECG sensor, fall detection with automatic emergency call, atrial fibrillation detection. Before a doctor would notice it, there are documented cases of the Apple Watch saving lives outright. A mechanical Rolex can do none of this, not one single thing. Apple Watch Series 10 from $399, the Hermes edition from $1,299. Identical features. The difference is in the strap and the logo. Even smartwatches now have their own price paradox. If the watch is once again a genuine instrument, why do all the others still exist? Legends. Some watches have moved beyond their category. They are no longer dive watches, pilot's watches, or dress watches. They are simply themselves. The Casio F91W, 1991. The design, the movement, and the price have not changed since. While the entire industry grew more complex, Casio changed nothing, because nothing needed to change. The Cartier Tank, 1917, Coco Chanel, Princess Diana, Andy Warhol. For over 100 years, the concept has not changed once. A legend is what happens when a watch outlives its purpose and becomes simply itself. The F91W at $12 and the Richard Mille at $1 million appear on the same list for one reason: both are impossible to mistake for anything else.